This video is sponsored by MPB. Poet and artist Johann Wolfgang von Goethe once wrote, "The beginning and end of all literary activity is the reproduction of the world that surrounds me by means of the world that is in me. All things being grasped, related, recreated, molded and reconstructed in a personal form and an original manner." And in many ways, every time I read these words, they seem to translate to me the essence of Edward Hopper's painting. Hopper was a man of very few words. He was very introverted, and in many ways his life was very normal, despite the fact that he became one of the most popular and important painters of the 20th century. He came from a middle-class family, was trained as an illustrator, and was quite successful at that, working with several magazines and particularly conceiving several popular posters during World War I. And although he struggled for a few years to find his medium and his style, once he settled for oil painting and for capturing what many would consider Americana or American landscape, he smoothly transitioned from commercial to fine art. And although I would say that Hopper does have a fascination with the American landscape, particularly with the American urban scene, he however sets himself apart by the tone and themes of his paintings. And throughout his career, Hopper focused on capturing solitude, resignation, nostalgia, boredom, and loneliness in environments as common as diners, offices, cafes, or motels. However, this transition to fine art was also in part a product of his marriage, since his wife Josephine, whom he married in 1924, became much of a promoter and agent that would deal with museums, galleries, and other aspects of the painting business. She was also his muse, and in many ways his best critic, as Josephine herself was a painter and an extremely talented one. And together they shared a very quiet and peaceful life, spending their summers in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and the rest of the year in New York City, where they lived. Being these the scenes Hopper took inspiration from to create his paintings, and amongst the most well-known we can count Chop Suey, painted in 1929, Early Sunday Morning, completed in 1930, New York Movie, 1939, and of course, Nighthawks, from 1942. And Hopper's work, in my opinion, represents that classic case of the artist whose art is built of layers, because at first glance his paintings can indeed represent the American life and scenes of the everyday. However, on a second look, we can identify in his paintings a sort of pensive quality. And although a lot of people might think that the loneliness and alienation in his images represent how he felt himself, experts of his work have attributed these qualities to his fondness for the quietness, stillness, and pensive moments in life. And after identifying these paintings as representatives of those quiet moments in life, we're led to this array of thoughts and feelings, because that's how we connect with an art piece. Because what's represented in that image is relatable at some level to something we've seen, experienced, heard of, or were touched by. And so, taking this painting as an example, we here have a scene that takes place at a porch, and we presume by the title of the painting and the way these people are dressed that it's a summer evening in some unknown American suburb, and we have this young man and this young woman who we assume can be a couple, and they are talking or discussing something. And judging by their expressions, there is a certain seriousness about their presence, as they seem quite apprehensive, as they both are looking down, sharing a moment of silence. And in this painting, just like in virtually every other of his paintings, there's a certain level of ambiguity that will leave us wondering about the nature of their feelings, and that's how this painting captures us, by making us question this inner nature of what's going on behind what the naked eye can see. And if you've realized what I've just done, basically I've described to you a sort of scene, and then I just went and dived deeply into what's going on. So we started by looking at these two people in a porch, and it's at night, etc. And then suddenly we focus on like their faces, and then suddenly we notice that they're looking down, and then we notice the posture of her, like sort of her body, her hands. And so we immediately start kind of like, we disconnect with the idea that this is a porch and this is whatever, and we start wondering what's going on in the painting. And so this is the exact transition between the outer and the inner world of a painting or an image of some sort. And so this is kind of like what we can learn with Edward Hopper, is to sort of, whatever it is that you photograph, even if it is like, for instance, something very simple, very, ordinary, the everyday sort of life, you can still work on building an image with layers. And I'm going to interrupt this here because I want to tell you about today's sponsor, MPV. And MPV is the largest platform where you can buy, sell, and trade your used photography and videography equipment. I myself have used this platform to acquire different lenses to my Lumix camera and to other cameras, and with that increase the visual quality of the videos. And I highly recommend it because the whole process is quite fast and effortless. I started by submitting information about the equipment I was selling, I got an instant quote, organized the free doorstep pickup, and within a couple of days I received my payment. But you can also trade your equipment for a different one, and with that upgrade your tools for whatever project you have in mind and for the future. So try your hand at buying, selling, or trading at MPB by checking the links on top of the description, and thank you MPB for sponsoring this segment. And now let's go back to the video. Lesson number 2 is of course on the importance of having a vision, and honestly many of us are led to believe that this is a hard thing to accomplish, that only a few people can do. And also for some reason, vision is also tied with success. And I really don't think that's the case. Everyone can have a vision, whether they're a professional photographer, someone who's just starting, or someone who photographed as a hobby for their entire lives. What's important to understand here is that vision is something that we construct and work on all our lives. Something that molds and shapes itself with the changes we experience in life and with the simple act of aging as well. So Opera's vision revolved around focusing on these quiet and introspective moments of life. But the truth is that by doing this, he told us inadvertently about how to make the common uncommon, or how to make an ordinary scene extraordinary by freezing it in time. And so this is something we need to remember next time we complain there's nothing to photograph because everything's boring or we've already seen it 1,000 times. Looking at Automat here, I can tell you that I've seen this scene 1,000 times or more. How many times have you not seen someone having a cup of coffee or a drink in silence by themselves within their thoughts? And if you can't, for whatever reason, capture it then, you can make a note of it and stage it to photograph it later on, who knows? And with Hopper, I gained this notion of the importance of seeing and seeking for that bit extra in the common life. And that prompted me to photograph more the everyday life, to seek for those feelings, but it also taught me about making mental notes of scenes I once saw and didn't have the opportunity to capture, so that later on I can capture them again, whether that involves a certain degree of staging or not. Now, lesson number 3 is on time, or the lack of it. And so whenever I encounter an Edward Hopper painting, I always get, in a way, sort of like lost in time, or time unconscious, if there's even a thing. But basically, you get the idea. You just sort of get this sort of like limbo area where you just dive deep. And I think this is helped by the ambiguity and by all the other formal qualities of the painting. And so for me, it is very important to explore that in photography and in art in general, because I feel like when you kind of like take or you remove from an image an element that connects it to a specific reality, whether that is color, whether that is just the way people are dressed, like that is representative of time, of a space, you focus more on what the image is about. So you kind of like force your brain to dive deep. Sort of in a way how we would say that black and white photography forces you by, taking off the element of color to sort of dive deep into another world or another dimension. And I've tried to translate this to my photography over time, and this is definitely something that I've taken from Edward Hopper's paintings. And so how can we achieve this timelessness? By perhaps mimicking what the painter did, by focusing on other elements of the image that in some way makes it transcend the boundaries of its context. Let's talk photography terms. The use of black and white immediately sends you to the land of emotions, removing from the equation the color that paints the space and time. But what happens when we have color? And will everything we photograph in black and white have this timeless dimension associated with it? Well, no. But just like when photographing with color, being thoughtful about your composition, deliberately omitting references to a certain period of time, such as clothing, technology, landmarks, and focusing on the meaning, intention, and feeling of an image can definitely put you on a path for timelessness with your photography. Now, lesson number 4 is on pictorial depth. Now, I'm not a painter, I've never had painting classes, so I hope I don't mess it up. But from my understanding, pictorial depth is very important in painting, and it is from a sort of point of view, of a formal point of view in terms of the qualities of the image. Now, how can we transport this to photography? Well, pictorial depth, in very basic terms, and from my understanding, is the information or the group of characteristics and elements in a two-dimensional image that make it seem or gives the impression that this image can be three-dimensional. So how can we transport this to photography, and what can we take from Edward Hopper's paintings? Now that's the question. So in painting terms, we could consider elements such as shadows, shades, linear perspective, overlapping, aerial perspective, texture gradient, and image size as cues for pictorial depth. And, well, pictorial depth in photography terms would be how we can add depth to our images. Looking at city roofs painted in 1932, there's a few elements we can apply directly into our photography, such as overlapping. There's elements in this image like the chimneys that overlap each other or overlap the building ahead. And when we see this, we will automatically infer that this is not one-dimensional, they are not squashed against each other, but rather there's a certain distance between them. Height is also another element that will add third-dimensional value, because looking at all these chimneys and skylights, they have different sizes, and even the perspective the painting has suggests a lower viewpoint, and this can easily be translated to photography. Other elements we can take from painting to photography are linear perspective, or what we in photography would call something like lines or converging lines, color and contrasts between light and shadow. And when we look at gas, for instance, which was completed in 1940, we see all these elements and how they work together to create depth. And now we can bring these to photography by practicing, but also by definitely paying attention to these elements and by trying different compositions around the same subject, and then compare them and see what they translate about the space and the subject. Edward Hopper painted roughly from the 1920s until the 1960s, and when we zoom back and think history-wise, the amount of things that happen in an art spectrum throughout the course of his life, we have the birth of the Dada movement, the rise in popularity of Art Deco, which would eventually be overpowered by Surrealism, and all the creativity of painters like Salvador Dali. And in the mid-50s, this was all replaced by the mid-century modern design and architecture, but we also have the rise of pop art and later on minimalism. And in all of this, Edward Hopper remained exactly the same. He was very, close to the world in a sense. He remained doing his own paintings with his wife, traveling to Cape Cod, New York, and he focused, and you can see throughout his career as a painter, he remained faithful to who he was as a painter, his subjects, his moods, his themes and ideas. And of course his muse, he painted his wife in so many, she was a big reference for his painting. And I'm pretty sure that if he didn't remain faithful to her, he would have had a big problem. But you get the idea that I'm trying to say, and if we make a parallel to the present, a sort of comparison, today we have so many things. We have Instagram, Twitter, social media, consumerism, TV shows, ads, all pushing you, beating you from all sides to do this, to buy this, to do that. But at the end of the day, it is important to remain truthful to who you are as a person and as an artist. And I'll never cease saying this because it's so important for your own identity and your own vision. And also because I feel that, in a way, people consider this having a vision as something that is very complicated and something that, is kind of only for certain people. I think it is achievable to everyone. And you never say no to experimenting. Please experiment. I always do. But I always remain close to home. And when I say this, I don't necessarily mean staying safe, but remaining close to home to the things that I feel are genuine to me, that I want to do, that I want to capture. And so, yeah, I guess that's the last lesson for today, and one of the most important ones. And don't forget to leave your thoughts down below. I will be reading them and replying to those that I can. And I wanted to thank MPB so much for kindly sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check their links down below as well. Really cool opportunities, a lot of gear. And if you want to try, just, try for yourself, see what suits you, see what doesn't. But, give it a try and see what you can incorporate in your style. And also down below, you'll be able to find links if you're curious to what I do, photographically speaking, even though I shared some of the photos that I've been doing throughout the years in this video. But yeah, if you're curious as well, you can grab a print. I have an open print shop down below. And I guess that I'll see you here for another video very soon. So stay safe, keep shooting film, or keep shooting, subscribe for a cookie, and